Now let's see the spinalis part first. As we already discussed, the spinalis part is the most medial part of the erector spinae muscle, and here in this figure we can appreciate that this portion, it is the most medial part, and this is the spinalis part what I have highlighted. And the spinalis portion having three types of the fibers. These are the spinalis thoracis, spinalis cervicis, as well as spinalis capitis. Out of them, the spinalis thoracis is the largest part, and in this spinalis thoracis muscle, it is going to arise from the lower two thoracic vertebrae and the upper two lumbar vertebral spine. So here this is the T11, this is T12 spine, this is L1 spine, and this is L2 spine. Now as these fibers, they are getting origin from the spinous processes of the lower two thoracic and the upper two lumbar vertebrae. This spinalis thoracis muscle fiber, they passes upward and going to insert into the upper thoracic spines. So this group of muscle, it is the spinalis thoracis muscle. This spinalis thoracis muscle, it is the largest part of the spinalis muscle, while the two other parts of the spinalis muscle, they include the spinalis cervicis and spinalis capitis. These two parts are often absent, and most of the time these two parts are not distinguishable. This spinalis cervicis muscle, it is going to arise from the spine of the C2, C3 and the C4 vertebrae, while the insertion of this muscle group, it is at the spine of the C7 and T1 and T2 spine, along with the ligamentum nuchae present at the lower part. So this group of muscle, it is somewhere like this. While the last part, that is the spinalis capitis muscle, it is represented by the occasional fibers of the semispinalis capitis muscle, and this group of the muscle, it is very small part, and it is going to insert over the spine of the C7 and T1 after getting origin from the knuckle line. As the spinalis group of muscle, they are situated in the most medial part of the back, and that's why they are going to arise from the spinous processes. Now let's see the second group of muscle, and this second group of muscle, it is the longissimus muscle. This longissimus muscle, it also having three part, and this longissimus muscle having the capitis part, cervicis part, and thoracic part. So here in this figure we can appreciate that this muscle, it is the longissimus capitis muscle, and this longissimus capitis muscle, it is going to arise from the C4 to T3 vertebrae, and this muscle group, it is going to pass upward and it is going to insert over the mastoid process. So this is the longissimus capitis group of muscle. Here in this figure we can appreciate this muscle group, that is the longissimus cervicis muscle, and this longissimus cervicis muscle, it is going to arise from the T1 to T6 transverse processes and going to insert over the C2 to C5 transverse processes. As this longissimus group of muscle, they are situated in the intermediate location just lateral to the spinalis muscle, so that's why they are not going to arise from the spine, but they are going to arise from the transverse process. So this longissimus cervicis, it is going to arise from the upper thoracic transverse processes and going to insert over the C2 to C5 transverse processes. Now let's see the spinalis part first. As we already discussed, the spinalis part is the most medial part of the erector spinae muscle, and here in this figure we can appreciate that this portion, it is the most medial part, and this is the spinalis part. Spinous processes of the lumbar vertebrae, as well as it is also going to arise from the transverse processes of the lower thoracic vertebrae. And this group of muscle, it passes upward and going to insert over the second to 12th ribs. Along with that, it is also going to insert over the lumbar vertebrae, over the costal processes, and the thoracic vertebrae having the transverse processes. So this group of the muscle, it is the largest part of the longissimus group, and this is the longissimus thoracis muscle. Now when we see the iliocostalis group of muscle, this iliocostalis group of muscle having three types of the fibers, including the cervicis part, thoracic part, and lumborum part. When we see this iliocostalis muscle, it is going to arise from the ribs, as it is the most lateral part of the erector spinae muscle. And here in this figure, we can appreciate this is the iliocostalis cervicis group of muscle, and this iliocostalis cervicis group of muscle, it is going to arise from the 3rd to 7th ribs, and it is going to insert over the C4 to C6 transverse processes. So this iliocostalis cervicis muscle, it is going to arise from the ribs, it is going to insert over the transverse processes of the cervical vertebrae. Now let's see the second part, that is the iliocostalis thoracis muscle, and here in this figure, this is the iliocostalis thoracis group of the muscle, and this iliocostalis thoracis group of the muscle, it is going to arise from the lower 6 ribs. So it is going to arise from the 7th to 12th ribs, and it is going to insert on the 1st to 6th ribs. So this iliocostalis thoracis, it is the muscle which is going to arise also from the ribs and insert also into the ribs. Now the last part of this erector spinae muscle, that is the iliocostalis lumborum muscle, and here in this figure we can appreciate this portion, it is the iliocostalis lumborum part. This iliocostalis lumborum muscle, it is going to arise from the sacrum as well as the iliac crest, and it is also going to arise from the thoracolumbar fascia, and this group of muscle, it is going to passes upward and going to insert over the 6th to 12th ribs along with the thoracolumbar fascia. So this muscle, it is the iliocostalis lumborum muscle. So we have completed all the 9 parts of the erector spinae muscle. So at the end of the discussion, we should know that this erector spinae muscle having 3 types of the fibers: most medially situated spinalis fibers, just lateral to it, or we can say intermediately situated longissimus fibers, while most laterally situated iliocostalis muscle fibers. These 3 types of the muscle fibers, they are subdivided into 3 smaller parts, and these are the and in case of the spinalis as well as the longissimus, these are the capitis, cervicis as well as the thoracis part, while in case of the iliocostalis, it has cervicis, thoracis as well as the lumborum part. In case of the iliocostalis, the capitis part is absent and the lumborum part is present, while the cervicis and the thoracis part, they are present all throughout the 3 types of the fibers of the erector spinae muscle. Now when we see the nerve supply of this erector spinae muscle, it is the true muscle of the back, and this erector spinae muscle, it is going to be supplied by the dorsal rami of the lower cervicis, thoracis as well as the lumbar spinal nerves. Now when we talk about the action of this erector spinae muscle, this muscle, as the name suggests, it is responsible for making the vertebral column erect in posture, and it is responsible for the extension of the vertebral column when contracted bilaterally. But when the unilateral contraction of the spinalis muscle is there, it will lead to the bending of the spine laterally to the same side. When the unilateral contraction of the longitudinous group of the fibers is there, it is responsible for the flexes and rotation of the head to the same side. Along with that, it is also responsible for bending the spine to the same side. When we see the contraction of the spinalis muscle unilaterally, it will lead to the bending of the cervical as well as the thoracic spine to the same side. So this is all about the erector spinae muscle.